Hi, welcome back, and thanks for joining us in this ongoing, ever deepening guided meditation into the source science, the missing science, the science of all science, the long quest for first philosophy, primal wisdom, enlightenment, the language of enlightenment. And by now, as we've had 8 meditations and more, you should be more familiar with the calligraphy, the meditative visual to really help us see and meditate our way in this guided meditation. So again, to remind you in joining us, and it's getting more familiar, I hope, that when I speak, I'm not giving information. I'm seeking to open up the source, the zone, the Zen space, so to speak, the fundamental field that is moving all events across all evolution. And by now, I'd like to go deeper with you because at the end of our last session, we were suggesting that with the new source science, getting into the deep space to get the unified field, the code, the missing code of Logos Sophia, the missing Logos code, Sophia code, the code of wisdom, the source of reason that enlightens and awakens the mind across all cultures and worlds, the source of truth and meaning and consciousness and science and arts and all of the highest virtues and performances of our cultural life. Religious, spiritual scriptures, all of it coming out of that source, whatever name we use for the fundamental field. And with this hitherto eclipsed source science, we've been suggesting that we're facing something new, a new deep diagnostic that we couldn't see before when we have source science. Source science is accessed through the missing code of the fundamental field, the code of the unified field. And we've been trying to get a deeper sense of what that means. What is that code? Whether we call it the Christ code, the God code, the Buddha code, the Om code, whatever name we use for the fundamental code. And there are many names for it because it's been moving all history and all spiritual, scientific, philosophical developments through the ages. What we've seen, just to look at this picture, we left off with this picture at the end of last session. And by now it's familiar that the deepest insight, perhaps the simplest, the greatest simplicity of all human research and spirituality and wisdom and enlightenment turns on one fundamental issue. And if we get it, it's a game changer. And that is that reality, the field of reality, is a fundamental, original field. Reality is a fundamental field, whatever name we use. God, Allah, Logos, Om, Tao, Brahman, whatever name for all of our great teachings of the first science. Whatever name we use, it's infinite. And when we meditate, we can't think about, we can't put the infinite in the box, the infinite source. It surrounds us. And when we begin to follow the source of reason, human reason, the light of reason, which comes from that source, and we're all coded with that fundamental code of reason, the Logos code, because we are Logos sapiens, it takes us to the recognition that the infinite is the source of all possibilities. These are simple points, but I'm suggesting that if we could really tap into it in its full power and potential, and not look at it in the more restrictive ways and tribal ways and localized ways, but go into the global space of global reason and open up the global mind, the global lens of consciousness. That's where we begin to go deeper into the science, the missing source science. And since it's infinite, it must be infinitely unified. Just think about and meditate on that with me again. We've done this several times, but it's been missing across the eons and the centuries of research. We speak of the infinite, God is infinite, or whatever we speak of the infinite. But to really access more deeply the infinite, we realize it's infinitely one. That's been known, but we can't articulate it in our ordinary levels of language, thought development, and rational development, cognitive development so far. We've got to go deeper. And that's where our great scriptures and wisdom and enlightenment teachers have been calling us to go higher, go deeper, upscript into the Logos, into the Om, into the Tao, into the Christ, into the Buddha space. And that code, when we enter that deep global space, the source, all things are interconnected. That axiom, and now we're speaking about science, source science, missing science, gives us profound axioms that are resonating across the planet through the ages. The infinite is one. Not one in an ordinary sense, different from 2 or 3 or 4, but infinite one. Think of that. Infinite means all possibilities. And infinite means it cannot be divided. That's why it's often referred to in our great scriptures and Enlightenment teachings as non-dual. But if we understand that in ordinary ways we're not getting the depth of it, non-dual means everything is interlaced, interconnected. People speak of the interconnected universe, but again, what language are we speaking? Are we speaking the deep language? Are we getting the access code? Or are we speaking it in our information box where we usually process our thoughts and our teachings and our scriptures and our sciences and arts in the space of information that dominates our lives? And that's really what we've been bringing out. When we go into source science, we'll be able to get a deeper read, a deeper take. What's been going on in human history across the planet? With all our great breakthroughs and developments and miracles that have happened in science and arts and technology and spirituality and ethics, great breakthroughs, but we're still stuck in some deep way or hitting boundaries that we haven't seen. We've got blind spots that our great geniuses have seen, and we're seeking ways to open up the blind spots to get us to go to a deeper space. So this simple point, the infinite is infinitely one, and that's the word unum. I'm using from the Latin. Unum is infinite unity. And because it's infinite, we're always, and that's what the double parentheses signs have introduced, innovative science to help us get this fundamental difference between when we're in a language, a space, a culture here that severs us, somehow barriers. It creates the technology that has evolved of information and talking about it, which is magnificent. And we've developed and we make shifts and changes and revolutions and evolutions here. But within this space, this technology, which we haven't really seen, this line represents a thought form, a mental processing. A technical word would be a logistic, not just the logic of how we use our terms. If all A is B and all B is C, then all, that's the logic. But the logistic is what is the technology that we're using to experience and read and process and shape and metabolize our life and our experience and our world and our culture and our meaning and our truth here with this language here. This somehow has cut us off and created a barrier. This thought, this motherboard, I call it a motherboard, which is a smotherboard because it's cutting us off from access to a deeper entering into this space of high culture, of ethics, of compassion, of love, of reason, of rationality, of coherence and connectivity, of flourishing and well-being. We've gone through this before. I'm just getting us ready to go deeper now. And to see that what I've suggested, several major axioms that comes out of source science. I'm saying when I say source science, I mean somehow when we cross from all of our customary normal ways of thinking and processing and language and the language arts and meaning and truth and narratives and belief systems and all of those that are familiar with our culture. This is our culture. But our great teachers, speaking from this deeper space, from the unum source, are calling us to rise and cross over. We've got to rise, we humans, not to use this script, but to rise into this script, the double bracket script. And when we enter the infinite space, the infinite unum, where everything is unified, it means this is amazing. All realities are connected because it's infinitely unified. You can't have two infinites. If you really get that, if we get that, humanity will be on a different. We'd have to rise to get it. And if we rise, then we are rising to our human essence, which is here, not here. This is adolescent. We're on our way. So the path of evolution is from here to here. Single brackets, single slashes, because it slashes and cuts off, to double brackets, which includes and incorporates and connects with the entire field. So the infinite is infinitely unum, and that means that it's pluribus, pluribus, all the diversity. Infinite, how much? Infinite. So one of the great scientific axioms of source science that have been echoed through the great theologies and first philosophies and Enlightenment teachings and mystics through the ages is that everything is interconnected. That means all of the God names, all of the first names, all of our narratives, all of our cultures, all of our scriptures, all of our experiences, all of us, all nature, all of the building blocks of our lives and our cultures, space and time and color and figure and motion, texture, effect, all mind, body. All of these names and pieces are deeply interflowing, interconnected, infinitely connected. That's astounding, because if we realize that Allah, in the Arabic tradition of calling out Allah, or Yahweh in the Hebraic tradition, or God or Christ or Om in the Hindu tradition, or Shunyata, emptiness, Dharma in the Buddhist tradition, or Lao Tzu, the Tao, all of these, they're connected. They cannot not be. That's huge. It's not just the grand first names of our different cultures and traditions are calling out to the infinite first, are in different fonts calling out to the same fundamental reality. That's basic science. It cannot be divided, it cannot be broken. And if Allah and God and Yahweh and Brahman and Om and Tao, for example, and Logos, Sophia, cannot be divided and split apart because they're all tapping into the infinite unum, that pluribus is unum, that sets the model of the fundamental science, the source science. And what that means is that everything that we have here in our everyday culture, we looked at that, when here, the thinker, here's the subject who thinks, the person thinking, right? This is a diagram, a meditative model, a visualization of the space of culture and life and psyche and experience and feelings and thoughts, emotions, human relations, and meaning and truth, all narratives, all of that's going on here. We, the thinker, this is my subjective mind space. We are thought. This refers to me, I am here. And what my experience is as if it's the screen upon which all of my experience and consciousness and whatever appears to me. This is where everything appears to me. My feelings, I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm thirsty, I'm mad, angry. My inner feelings, my outer feelings, and perceptions. So the sun is rising, rain is falling. Whatever, all of that's going on here. In this language form, this level, that took eons to develop to this level of information. This is magnificent. But somehow we don't, there's a blind spot. We can't see that this is cutting us off and therefore desourcing. If this is the source, fundamental primal reality, the fundamental field where what? Everything is infinitely interflow. That is very challenging to process because you want to process it from our familiar language form, from a lens and thought we are familiar with here. We want to hear that and process it here. It doesn't work. We can't download it here and get it. The great path of evolution of all our great Enlightenment teachings is calling us to upscript from this level of development to cross that boundary and enter into the space where the I and the other here are divided. There's a dividing line between my space and not I, not I, the object. The object that is, we then break out the information. There's a person, Socrates is wise, is or isn't. For example, John is the father of Mary. Relations, reason here, human reason here. Magnificent. This logos, the logos here, is not the same as a logos in the deep space. So when some great teachings suggest in the beginning is the logos, in the beginning, in the infinite origin, this is the origin, this is the field of reality, is a logos. The light of reason, the word, the infinite word. It's not the same as the word here. This is huge. When I use a word to describe the world, snow. I have a thought. Snow is white. Snow pictures snow out there in the world. There's a deep division between my thought, my words, my psychic space, my belief, my judgment, my perception, and what it pictures out there, words picture, they represent. Language represents the world and feelings. Inner experience, outer, language represents. But when we cross into deep word, the primal word, the infinite word, then you cannot break word from world. Word and world permeate. Being and word are one. They're connected. And in being, you have time and space. So word and time and space connect. And when you follow the logic of the infinite unum, as all of our great theologies have been asking, what is the nature of this infinite? If we speak God talk, Yahweh talk, Allah talk, Brahman talk, Om talk, what are the forces? How do we think and process the depth of the infinite word? But because it's infinite, it cannot be divided. If the world opens up, let there be light, the whole world is wording. The word is worlding. And we are the word. We're wording. So being, reality, is filled with word flow. Where is that science coming from? From the basic self-evident truths that the infinite unum, you cannot use a finite name for the infinite. If you use the word space, here, it's separate from time, and separate from color and motion. We keep breaking it down. Every word has an ID, and it puts it in its own space. It breaks it apart. It separates. This technology names and separates, and it's great. We get benefits from identifying things. As a child is learning language, as we teach our children how to speak in whatever language, we name things and use the words that represent and represent rather than words that present. When we say I am, crossing into this field, when we say I am, we're not referring to something else. We're not describing something. Description is here. But presentation, embodiment, performance, disclosure. When we speak in the zone, we are our speaking. We be wording. And we're not used to that. That's why Jesus, for example, when he was trying to teach the disciples and his followers here who are in this language, the Christ language, which is here. That's the Christ. The Christ is the code. The Christ is the word in the flesh, the logos in the flesh. That means the flesh and the logos cannot be divided. The infinite word is in the flesh. Consciousness is filled with body. So whenever we start thinking in this space, every word here that is broken out and separate, when you take time and put it here, it becomes infinite time flow. Why? Because the infinite has infinite time flow. It's not finite. You might wonder, could we get certain words in our culture here that aren't there on the ground floor? No. Why? Because whatever shows up here, any smallest iota that comes here is being held and made possible by the infinite source. That's one of the great axioms. The infinite sources all. If we could handle that, it means at any point we find in our culture, in our narrative, in our worldview, in our feelings, our beliefs, our events, the infinite is already being showing up there. So one of the greatest simple axioms flowing out of this unum continuum, it's a continuum. Not continuum here, but continuum in the sense that whatever is encountered in the deep space, you will find all of the other items of the universe there within it. So time, double bracket time, now time, presence. When you enter the zone, you enter presence, and that's being. Being is presence. Not just the present, not present, but presence. And presence means mindful. It means conscious I-aming, awaring. Being is awaring, is wording, is minding, is bodying. So in our more awakened body, it's mind-body. You can't separate. Space-time, mind-body, word, mind-word, word-world. All connected. That's a continuum. And we don't know that. This is new. The future of our education and raising our children and our cultures and our citizens is to learn basic ontology, the missing source script, to understand that words that we are used to in our everyday vocabulary, at this level of linguistic and logical and rational and cognitive mental development, goes deeper when we enter the Christ code and the Buddha code and the Moses code and the Socrates Logos code and the Tao code and the Allah code. When we enter the Allah language, we have to surrender something in order to cross. Something deep has to happen to cross this barrier and let this go and shed that behind. As the caterpillar morphs into the butterfly, the humans here have, in leaving this stage of development and maturing into deeper compassion and ethics and reason and science and love and well-being, life, liberty, well-being. So when Jesus is speaking the double bracket words, he is the word. He's not talking about it, he's manifesting. And that is Buddha. When Buddha speaks, Buddha is not a being that we can talk about. Buddha is the field. So Buddha's speech is the Dharma, the connectivity of all things. Buddha got this. All things are unum pluribus. Diversity, pluribus, unum, connected, unified. There's infinite diversity in the source field. It's not just unity. Unum, infinite unity is filled with all possibilities. And that's infinite diversity. And diversity here is separate. Unity versus diversity. What typically happens in this mental space is that it breaks out into opposites. Unity versus difference. It's either one or the many. But when you go into the zone, into this space, into the deep space, the one is filled with the many. Strange things happen in source logic, source science, source reason. What seems divided in either or becomes both together. The I and the other are one, are unum. But how can I and the other be unum and yet different? It's I, thou. The thou is different. I is different from thou, the other, whatever the other is, the thou. So there's difference, but not the way it is here, that I am different from the other. Difference here is broken apart, polarized. Difference here is held together in unum. And that's really the main medicine of our future humanity. We've got to find the unum in the pluribus to survive and overcome the fragmentation and violence and brokenness and polarization and degeneration and disintegration that leads to all forms of human disorders and pathologies in our inner lives, in our interpersonal lives, in our intercultural lives, in our interreligious lives, in our educational lives of the multiple liberal arts, seeking to find the unum, but we can't find it here. We've got to go and cross into a deeper technology of consciousness where we can experience how words and world and things and I and mind and space and time cannot be broken apart. So when we go into deep time, we'll find that space. How much space is here? Infinite space. It can't be otherwise. There is nothing under the sun, under the logos, that isn't being held and made possible by the source. So the source is ever present. Present, infinite presence. Unum, the infinite is infinite unum, unity, infinite presence. It cannot be pushed away. That means wherever we are, wherever we live, whatever story we're living here, the infinite is right there in every breath, at all times. And when we get that, when we realize that I can't push the infinite away, whether you call it Yahweh or Allah or Om or Tao or Buddha, Dharma, or whatever name, or the unified field of physics, for example, if we really get to the unified field in source science, we'll find it's infinitely here right now. Which is weird science. Source science is weird in the sense that you can't break the infinite down because of the infinite unum. You can't split it. You can't break it. So the only way that you can do the science is to go to a deeper coherence, meditative intelligence. Not predicative, talk about it, but meditative where you're in it. And your own thinking and your own consciousness is integral to the entire field. And there's no severance between mind and body. You can't break those two. Matter and spirit can't be spread. Nature and culture can't be broken. So what would it take in educating ourselves and the children to learn the deeper language in which any word here, like space, you put it here, you'd find space and time are together. And in time you'd find mind is there, consciousness. You can't split consciousness from mind. Why? Because source is infinite awareness. How much consciousness is there in the infinite? Well, all consciousness comes from the infinite, of any kind. Even the form of warped consciousness that denies that there's any source is still sourcing. So infinite consciousness is stunning if you can begin to handle it in source science. We can't handle it here, but when we go into the deep space and begin to say, oh my God, OMG, how much consciousness, not understood here, not small c, but consciousness, infinite. It means the universe is the God field, the Allah field, the Yahweh field, the Brahman field, the Om field, infinite consciousness. It means being is consciousness, is word, is space, is time, mind and matter, I and thou, private space and public space. You can't break it. So what we need to see in this meditation, and now we're just rehearsing some of the major points that came out, is that this, carrying this all around is saying whatever world we have evolved over eons to this stage where we're using this technology, it dominates us, and it's been a great advance, but it's holding and retarding us and blocking us from listening to the call of our great teachers and scriptures, of the infinite call of this field that's making all of this possible. That alone is one of the greatest axioms to realize when humans living in our everyday culture begin to get it, that I couldn't breathe, I couldn't see, I couldn't have a thought without the source. All is being source. And it's not over there, it's right here in every iota. The infinite is wherever we are. And our higher self is always with us, not far away. So even though this visual has a cultural space here where we're living, and that's where humanity has evolved, and for centuries have been living in this space and making progress and trying to, and we in this space we are doing with our belief systems and our worldviews and our paradigms and our narratives and our arts and our sciences, we're trying to understand and make sense of things and use language and words to picture reality, our inner reality and our outer reality, and make sense of human disorders and to diagnose it and to solve it and do activism and life coaching and self-help here. We're trying to solve the problems that we're facing in the human situation in this space and don't realize that our great teachers are saying, can't do it. Why? Because the problems we're finding here are not being seen correctly as when we go back and in the source science and say, oh, that's what terrorism is. That's ideology. That's extremism. That's racism. That's homophobia. That is misogyny, hatred of women. Misology, hatred of logos. Nihilism. Emptiness. Addiction. Breakdowns. Violence. War. All of the breakdowns here, we're trying to fix it in this space. We're trying to fix it here, but it's futile. Centuries has shown to really solve it and find the peace. We can't make peace here because we're in the war zone that cuts. The slasher slashes everything apart and makes it polarized, and we haven't seen that. Our great teachers have seen it. This is dual, but that's too mild. It's not just this dual, it's everything, it's dual, D-U-E-L. Everything is broken apart by the nature of the ID law that says everything has a name tag. And we don't realize that's breaking it apart, breaking this apart. So living here in this culture, we're nice, good people with good intentions, but by using this technology that we haven't seen and called out, so we can break this barrier and cross into the civilized higher zone of compassion. But the language voltage here is high. Awakening the mind to global power of the word, entering the Christ word. We can't use ordinary words at this level of development. We've got to upscript to the integral words where they're connected because of the infinite connectivity of the unum pluribus. And when we do awaken with the code, here's the code. The code of everything is interlaced. The I and the other are always connected. Here, the I and the other are disconnected and separated. And I am separated from myself. This I is separated from my higher self here. By the technology that dominates my life and colonizes culture here, and the arts and sciences and all of our great magnificent developments are still laboring under a colonized mental ontological space. Ontology is being. And ontology is the source science, the science of being and well-being. So what I'm suggesting in this meditation, and taking time, because for centuries we haven't gotten this, and if we don't get this, we might as well pack up and just turn it off and don't look at this anymore. Don't stay on this journey. I'm trying to suggest this isn't new. Not new in the sense of newfangled, but new in the sense it's ancient, it's old, it's great. All of our great teachers have been trying to get this into the open. But we've been listening to and hearing it, which is with a language and lens and thought processes and cognitive word development that we have. And it's time to open it up and see the deep medicine of Jesus and Buddha and Moses and Krishna and Mohammed and Lao Tzu and Socrates and all of the great geniuses through the ages that are tapping into the space and trying to find a way to get us to see this seeing here. Source see, source vision, source life, source power, source humanity, source reason, not with derivative, local, tribal reason. This is more tribal space. This is global space. Tribal in the sense that it localizes whatever worldview I have. I use my lens and I see reality through my narrative with my lens, and I can have different lenses, and cultures are fighting out to say whose narrative is going to be true. This is where meaning and truth in our cultural lives happens on this screen. And there's been a long battle of worldviews and narratives and belief systems and sectarian. Even within Christianity, which is the right Jesus? Which is the right narrative? Is Jesus the only Son of God, or is Jesus the Christ in all of us? For example, how do we adjudicate that? There are sectarians. It's sectionized. So sectarianism is the ideology that keeps the narrative that doesn't realize it's being forced without, in the technology itself, to separate and get a different lens and get the right picture. Is science the right and only right picture? Which science? Which theory? We go from Copernicus, we go to Newton, we go to Einstein. Which lens is the right? We want to get the right story. Is it Allah or Yahweh? Is it Christianity or Islam? Or is it Buddha? Or is it yoga? Which is the right story? Whereas when we cross into the deep space and realize that all stories are going to be held and brought out of the infinite unum. It sources all possibilities. So every word that we use in our language is already coded with the infinite double bracket space. And I illustrated with the pen. We could put the pen in the box here. I see the pen. And we talk about the pen is black, the pen is for writing, and I give all the story about the pen. It's objectified, it's an object. But when you bring the pen into the zone, into the source space, you can't use these eyes. You have to open up and meet the pen. And when you open up yourself into the space, into the open space of boundless connectivity, then the pen speaks volumes. It has the infinite code within it. Every grain of sand has the infinite code within it. And once we see that, this is miracle space. This is sacred space. Every breath, every vision, everything we see here, double bracket seeing, right, is miraculous, is sacred. This is sacred space. This is desecrated derivative. And we can't have sacred life in a space that is somehow violent because it's slashing and cutting and separating and polarizing and dividing. So what I wanted and wish to do in this meditation, to go deeper then, is for us to really get a sense for the first time. This is what I'm suggesting. This has never been seen and said. We need source science to see and say what I'm suggesting. That reality, understood in the deep double bracket space of this technology, where everything is interconnected, and words are not picturing and talking about, but disclosing and revealing, and opening up and presenting. This is representing, this is presenting. This is representational, picturing something else, and this is performing, manifesting, disclosing, showing, revealing. you are one with the Word. So when the athlete is in the zone, when the athlete who is a runner, I am running, single bracket running, is I am running, I am running. But when you go into double bracket running, what is that? The runner is the running. I'm illustrating. When you say I am, you're amming. You're not talking about it. When the runner is in that peak performance of being in the magical space, of being in the zone, she is the running. The runner and the running are one. Jesus is speaking that I and the Father are one. I am the Word, I am the truth, I am the life. That's this language, not this language. Because truth, snow is white, is true if snow is white. If it's a fact, it pictures and represents the facts out there in the world. Because language pictures here. But the Word, in the beginning is the Word. This Word is being. It is infinite time, infinite space, infinite awareness, infinite consciousness, infinite knowledge, infinite power, infinite love. This space is love. Why? Because everything is interwoven in a deep musical harmony of connectivity and joy and bliss. That's why it's nirvana. That's well-being. So when we're cut off and de-sourced, if this is a source, well, somehow our technologies of culture making and language and meaning and truth and experience and narratives here, our narrative life here cuts us off and we're de-sourced. And the great medical axiom of medicine here, source medicine, the language of being, is that when we're de-sourced, we suffer abysmal breakdowns. To be de-sourced is to suffer. And wisdom and enlightenment and scripture and spirituality is first seeking to bring this out to see what's causing that. And why is there a separation between us and the deeper space? How do we cross from this dimension into the dimension of source? Into the infinite flow. The Om space. The yoga space. The Buddha space. The Christ space. The Allah space. The Rumi space. Something has to happen to let this go. This is a deep implant, deep within our subconscious being and culture. It's coded in the culture. It's a code. It's pre-coded. It's not the source code, but it's a code of culture making. So making culture here has a code, but it's not the mature code of interconnectivity. So I hope you're beginning to get a feeling and sense of this meditation that when we're in the zone, when the athlete's in the zone, when the lovers meet in this space and the two are one, they're different, I and the other, but the other, so the love bond, the love bond is a deep interflow and connection in the otherness. The two are one in some profound way. They're two, but they're one in the unum pluribus. I and the other are other, but one. That's the deep space of the missing code and the deep language. And so we don't have the vocabulary for that yet. What each of us needs, and this is what I've been doing in my seminars and as a teacher of philosophy, of global philosophy, for decades now, is that this is more tribal reason, but global reason. My work is in global reason. We've got to cross into the global space and open up the global lens and experience the laboratory where the word is the being. So the word here, language, literacy, reason, intelligence here has a deeper voltage of connectivity and coherence than we do in our dominant space, where the technology that we're using here names, identifies, separates, and we try to link them back together. These links are not the same as the deep unum flow. The continuum here, there is no breach. All is connected. And that's the feel of reality. Even here. Even though we don't see it and we're breaking it up with our mental processing here, even though we're breaking it, we can't break it. So we're still connected. Every point here is still sacred, though we can't see it and feel it. The infinite is present here in every breath. That's why the narratives of the Christ, the Logos, being coming into the world to help humanity rise again and cross over. Or Krishna, the voice of Om, coming down to help Arjuna, the person, a warrior here, learn the science and technology of yoga and to cross into the Atman, into the high space. And the Buddha says the Buddha is coming into the world of suffering to help live without suffering himself, herself, because the Buddha brings the Buddha field into the world and helps to rise to end the suffering. What is the suffering? It's caused by a deep implant technology that cuts us off from source. So language here is profound interconnection. And how do we know our vocabulary? If you could take time and from that begin to derive space, and within time, consciousness and mind, and within mind and consciousness, reason, so that reason and time and mind and word and world cannot be broken, so that the world is already given and the world is reality. So word and world and reality and you keep going and seeing. And so within time, all of this, and space, and within space, body and matter, and within matter, figure and texture and color and motion, and all of those other sub-words come out of space-time. But mind is there. You can't sever mind and consciousness from time. Then you're beginning to get the literacy of the source code, the missing source code, and the source science, and the diagnostic. So to sum this up in this transitional meditation, to say what are we trying to do with this source science? How do things look here? How do we, from this point of view, looking down into the human situation here on the ground where we live, and looking at all of the pathologies from this diagnostic here, from this space, looking at that, not from here trying to solve it, but from the source. We were able to see for the first time that widespread disorders that we would recognize here as disorders in this space, when seen from a global light, from a global scientific source, medical, because this is medicine, when seen in the light of source medical diagnostic, we can begin to see, and this is the main point I'd like to bring out in this meditation, to help us get a flavor that this motherboard, there is a motherboard shaping all of our culture as we know it, the normal, right? To be well adjusted and normal here, right, is really seen to be abnormal from the deeper space. So whether we call it sin or samsara or whatever name we use for the broken off, desourced, when we're desourced, we're fragmented. When we're fragmented, our being is broken. When our being is broken, we are ill-being. And medical ontology is the ontology of being, how to heal our being, so that there are certain viruses. So we need a new language, a new medical language for deep source science that we never had before. So medical ontology, the science of being, the source science, is going to have a deeper take on what's going wrong when we have deep addiction and substance abuse, when people are at the suicidal edge of saying there's no point in living, when the lights go out, the light is here, when the lights go out and we are living in darkness and meaninglessness, in the middle of our midlife crisis, what's happening? We're beginning to realize and feel the breakdown and the fragmentation and disconnect between ourselves and ourselves. So whether it's a midlife crisis of meaning, what is a crisis of meaning? A reality crisis, a being crisis. When our children are suffering and depressed, what is depression? The loss of joy and bliss and light and playfulness and ethics and compassion and love, when we don't feel a connection and the relational flow, and we're feeling the alienation, the loneliness and aloneness and the isolation. When families break apart because we're not in dialogue, we have our different views and we just don't see eye to eye, we can't get along. And there's gender war and disconnect between parents and their kids, and between siblings with each other, and out in the marketplace with in a multicultural society with multi-views and allegedly, if the civic space is here, and we have different religions and cultures, and there are Jews and Muslims and Christians and Buddhists and yoga practitioners and New Agers and scientists and atheists and nihilists and all of these different isms that come from here. This is the place of ideology. That has not been understood. Ideology is not just a belief system that I have or some people have. We all, in this culture, is an ideology. An ideology is a network of ideas, cultures, concepts, theorems, beliefs. Those that make up my worldview. If I believe that matter rules and all is matter, that's one ideology. If I believe consciousness rules and spirit rules, that's another ideology. And ideology is a narrative here. So to be in this space is to be in the space of ideology. But ideology is cut off from truth. the source, if we're cut off from the source of reason, the source of science and truth and reality, if we're cut off, the field of reality accessed here in the double bracket technology reveals what is. And if we're cut off from that, we're going to be starved in all kinds of ways. And that is ontological malpractice, ontological, existential, angst, facing death. Because facing death here, we can't understand. When we see death from this point of view, our great teachers knew this is death and this is life. And death is caused by being cut off from the source of life. So when we look deeply into the human condition at wide-ranging breakdowns in our family life, in our workplace, in our civic space, democracy is not working, we're not in dialogue. We're in power plays with different ideologies and interest groups and belief systems. And we're striving to get the dominant story that will dominate the culture here, but that's not pluralistic, pluribus, that's not pluralistic, that's not healthy. How do we have a healthy pluralism and diversity without giving up the coherence and community and unity of a unified sacred polis? You've got to go higher. Unum pluribus. And the founding visionaries in the American visioning of e pluribus unum, out of the many, the one. It's calling for an upgrade of the cultural space here, the civic space here of dialogue, dialogos, in the logos, where we can connect with our diversity and come together as one people in our diversity. We can't do that here. So that what we're seeking to do in this meditation is to just begin to get it, that vast diversity of breakdowns that within my inner life, I'm lost because I have multiple lenses. I am a practicing Jew and I believe in the biblical, but I'm a physicist and I'm doing the Big Bang theory, and I know that's true too. And I'm seeing my therapist to try and get my act together and heal myself because I'm facing a midlife crisis. And I'm doing some yoga and I'm trying Tai Chi and trying to find the unity. And I'm following Jung and the transpersonal, and I'm in the New Age movement, and listening to my gurus and my teachers and the best-selling authors that are calling me to a better life here. And I'm trying to go from meaningless to meaningful here. But this is not being called out. If we don't call out from source science, the technology that dominates our lives here and our cultures, then we can't solve the problems that we face, the breakdowns that comes from the very technology itself. Gives an ID to everything and breaks it apart in either or. S is or isn't P. Is or isn't. It's either or. That is the technology we're living of identity. If A is A, then not A. A and not A. I, not I. Wise or unwise. Visible, invisible. On and on. Muslim, not Muslim. Christian, not Christian. It keeps breaking it down, and no connection. Because connections here are not the same as the flow of the unum continuum. Interconnectivity here, love, compassion, dialogue, connectivity and diversity here is not the same as when we feel we have relations here. Relations here are weak, anemic, and artificial and synthetic. Here it's organic and whole and grounded in the flow of reality itself. So we have two different cultural spaces before us in our evolutionary journey. The source calling us to move into connectivity and to experience a deep continuum where every iota is connected in interflow, and to have the technology to handle boundless connectivity and co-arising of all things here. Nothing can be broken apart here. And it takes high courage and voltage and rational power to face and handle that science of reality here. And this technology is outmoded. It's defunct. We've got to let it go. It's been dysfunctional for centuries, and our great teachers saw it. Buddha saw it. Moses, Krishna, Socrates. We're living in the cave. Mohammed is seeing it, calling us higher. On and on through the ages, our great geniuses who see this space have seen this is not where we belong, but this is where we are. How do we tell people and help coach people and call them by the word of God, the word of source, the word of science, to somehow realize that we're busted here and we've got to make a pilgrimage across this line? Do we tell them they've got to give up the ego and give up desire? Those are misdiagnostic. what we need for the real science to cross, we need to say something is trapping us, colonizing us here, and holding us in culture here, and check it out, here it is. We can see it now with source vision. It's the motherboard technology that's using us in the information, talk about it. Here we talk about it, we give the information, our beliefs, our hopes, our feelings, our emotions, all here in this motherboard, because we don't realize it cuts us off deeply from an access to the place of compassion and nonviolence and flow and reason and sustainable culture. Ethics is here. I and thou are connected. If I violate you, I violate me because of the law of interconnect unum pluribus. Ethics is here. Reason is here. Justice is here. Compassion is here. Here we have violence, slashing, objectification. I and it. I, it, I, thou. So the deep theme that we're going to keep going deeper and deeper, because I'm sure you must be asking, could it be that when a person is feeling suicidal and is lost and the lights aren't on, and she is facing, why should I live? What's the point? I have no raison d'être, reason to be. This is the raison d'être, the reason to be. But this is the joy and the bliss and the nirvana and the heavenly space. So when the lights are out here, right, in the cave, and I'm feeling it, it's coming up in my dreams. I can't sleep. My love life is broken. I'm in a codependent, sick relationship. I'm seeing my therapist. I have polar disorder. I have ADD distraction. I can't focus. I'm not saying that there aren't physiological, chemical, brain issues that contribute to human dysfunctions. I'm not going there. I'm suggesting, rather, that from an existential point of view, being cut off and being used and held in a space that fragments and breaks and polarizes, it's going to show up in every moment and every breath in our lives living in that space, that colonized space. Ideology wars, holocausts, genocides, ethnic cleansing, violence to women, misogyny, hatred of logos, sophistry, nihilism, atheism. Theism and atheism are in the same boat. Theism to saying, I believe in God, or I don't believe in God, are still both in the same boat. Polar narratives, spiritual or material? Is it Hegel or Marx? Is Geist moving history, or is matter moving history? Is it which story? Well, they're polarized. Well, they're both in the same boat using the same technology. That has not been seen. You can have deep disagreements here of different stories competing. Is it Big Bang or Genesis? Well, maybe we need to go to Genesis here in the beginning. And maybe Big Bang is let there be light. The stories taken here are different. When we are in this technology, we are in polar splits, but both are in the same boat. That's the evolutionary Titanic. That all of these diverse narratives, as long as they're in this trapped space and cut off from the source, they're going to be partial truth, and that's what sophistry is. Science is tapping reality. Sophistry is having an opinion, a belief system, and we believe it, and I can get many people to join my group and believe with me, and we hold those truths to be true, and therefore our story is the dominant true story, and your stories are secondary and derivative. That's the condition of our narrative lives and cultural lives, vying for the informational narrative space of whose narrative, whose lens, which scientific theory. We believe that Einstein has gone beyond Newton. Newton's lens was not good enough to understand nature. But Einstein has to be overcome. Perhaps there are superluminary velocities in the universe, in non-locality. But there is non-locality. There is superluminary. There is the butterfly effect. Here. Not here. The unified field is here. Field of all fields. Can't find the unified field here. Is light, wave, or particle? Either or. Which is, well, when you go into light, the source light is filled with fractal power. Every point here being filled with the infinite has fractal power. What does that mean? It has boundless connected flow. You can't reduce it to one item. A grain of sand here is filled with the entire field. But here it's just a grain of sand. It's dirt. So any point, all of this is sacred space here too, but we just aren't able to see it correctly with this lens and this technology. But when we somehow cross into the sacred space, everything is filled with infinite presence. And that's basic science. Everything is sacred. Everyone is sacred. And if we can tap that, that's when we light up as humans in our true culture and civic space and family space and personal space and interpersonal space and deep dialogue. And the ethos, the ethics of deep dialogue is where the self and the other are connecting. In their otherness are still together, unimpervious. Rather than monologue, where my lens, we're fighting out with our lenses. Which lens, which narrative is the right one? Which worldview, which belief system? I can change my story. Let's change the story. Let's change your narrative. Let's have a paradigm shift. All of that talk is still here. To change the story, imagine letting go of this storytelling. This is where we tell our stories. Our narratives are here. But how can we narrate a deeper story that cannot be told? The storytelling is here. You can't tell this story here. You got to go into the deep space to be the story, like the runner who's being the running, or the I am who is amming. Because being is amming. And that's what God said to Moses, I am. I'm amming, I am that I am. God is amming. Why? Because it's infinite am. Being is infinite. And infinite is infinite consciousness, infinite awareness, infinite knowledge, infinite love, infinite truth, infinite meaning, infinite matter, infinite space. Everything is infinite in this space and connected. And we can't hold any of these great names that we've come up with, we humans here. We're all gifted from the Word. Any word we have comes out of the infinite Word. Basic science, baby science. Any word, any story, any narrative, any scripture has got to come out of the infinite script. And when we have the source code, we can decode it. We could see that Jesus speak, and Buddha speak, and Krishna speak, and Socrates, and Lao Tzu, and Mohammed, when they're speaking in this language, in this deep source language, they're co-speaking. And they're echoing each other in the deep science and axioms of the space. What are some of the axioms? All are interconnected. Everything is interconnected. What else? There's infinity in a grain of sand, and eternity in an hour. Basic axioms. Where is that coming from? The infinite flow of reality. Being is infinite flow. Therefore, infinite connection. Therefore, infinite love. Therefore, nirvana. Therefore, there is no split between matter and mind. Matter is sacred. It's mind matter. It's mind body. It's space-time. It's I-thou. All of these splits that we have here are healed in the deeper intelligence of Source. I know that's a lot to take in, a lot to process, and I really have to hold the space. Over the past 50 years working in the laboratory of teaching to help discover and clarify this passage, living in the great teachings and enlightenment and wisdom and philosophies and sciences and arts, and living in the liberal arts, to see the quest and the call of all cultures, the call of the infinite, calling us to enter into and cross into. The ultimate pilgrimage of humanity is moving from this evolutionary space of being colonized and cut off in the desert to come into the oasis of the promised land here, in the source, in the pure land of Buddha, the pure land of Om. That's the pure land, where the land is a conscious space too, because you can't separate land and nature from living. So the infinite is infinite life, and that's why the words here live. This is a living word. When you're I aming, the words are alive. When Jesus says, I am the way, I am the word, I am the laws, I am the Christ. That's the living word. This is living and this is dead stuff. These are pieces of signs and symbols that picture, but these are living signs and words that speak and declare and show up and be. And we're being called to be. And primary being, the quest of humanity, is to go from derivative being, broken being, busted, desourced being, to primary being, to our true self. I am. And to do that, you can't do that with this language. You've got to let go of this stage of development and go higher and evolve into. So let's sum up this journey. I'm going to go deeper next time. we're going to see that widespread dysfunctions that we would not have thought of putting together before. Someone fearing death, the loss of meaning, a midlife crisis, depression, facing the emptiness of life, the loss of love, broken sexual relations because we can't connect, marriages that break, families that fall apart, cultures that go at war, religions that are in clash, liberal arts that are vying for departmental space in each their fields, and turf wars in the academy. Who would think to put all of these personal breakdowns of psychological, psychiatric disorders and physiological symptoms and mind-body splits and the tensions of that and facing death and dying and despair and angst and cultural depression and the loss of meaning and disenchantment. All of these are all connected. Why? They're coming from the slasher. A technology of naive identity we didn't realize, and a technology of either or that keeps separating the thinker from the object, and objectification and reduction. It's being caused by this. Who would have thought that many of these widespread disorders are scientifically, medically traceable to the smother board? The smother board that is giving us our culture and our capacity to see and think and reason is itself creating a blind spot so it can't see itself. We're seeing here. We can't see the deeper implant of a thought form, a pattern, an addiction to a mental processing pattern and a processing plant that is breaking and fragmenting and polarizing and disintegrating our cultural lives and our psyches and our human relations and our relationship with nature and other cultures and other religions. All of them, these widespread pathologies, are traceable to the motherboard, this motherboard that is calling us to let go and move higher into the source reality. When we get the source code, which goes right back to the fundamental that infinite is infinitely unum, and unum, from there, everything begins to flow powerfully. If you can get the unum axiom, the unum pluribus, what's the fundamental pulse of reality? Unum pluribus. Infinite unity in infinite diversity, connected and interflow. So if there's a consensus in deep ontology about what is reality must be like, everything is interflow. And all of our words are interflow. And all of our lives are interflow. All our religions and scriptures and narratives and disciplines and liberal arts are interflow. If we want interdisciplinary intelligence, we can't find it in the broken space, which is undisciplinary. But to get to deep discipline and feel the connections of the arts and sciences and the liberal arts of natural science, social science, humanities, and the human sciences here in the unum pluribus, then we begin to become liberal arts. We've got to liberate education from being here and learning this script as taking it as the ultimate script to a deeper intelligence and word power and rational power and coherence and culture making. So that's a lot to process, I understand. I hope you can stay with me. And because it's life and death. And I'm with passion trying to show and see for myself. It took me years to see this is different. This has not been seen before. The source code has not been fully seen. And when I began to see that more and more, year after year, I said, I've got to bring this out. I've got to help culture see there is a motherboard that is giving us a technology to talk about it and process information and culture and meaning and truth and language and disciplines and narratives and worldviews and belief systems here, and not realizing that it's chopping us up and breaking us apart. And we can't hear our great teachers who are speaking from a deeper space and trying to get us from source intelligence to rise into a civilized space of deep reason, into the logosphere, into Sophia. In the Greek, Sophia is wisdom, living, embodied wisdom. So it's Logosophia. The Om, the Tao, the Yahweh, the Allah, the Logos, they're all interconnected in this space. So let's catch our breath and take a rest, and we'll come back again at the next section where I'd like to go more deeply into, let's look at these widespread disorders and begin to see the science, the source science, that they're all being generated from fragmentation and breakdown. And when the psyche of the human is being broken off from herself then there's going to be each from each other, and every piece is being put into a separate, broken separation, fragmentation. When we're living in a fragmented, disintegral cultural life and space, we're going to see deep ontological disorders in medical ontology. And in a way, the smotherboard is a virus, and we all have it. We are born into that. When we say we're born in sin or born in samsara, whatever, we don't have to use those terms. We're born in separation. We're born into a culture, a code, a deep implant cultural code in our human development that is not the highest development. It's adolescent, and we have to go, and we must urgently grow into the source intelligence, where everything lights up. Everything we have that we value is just going to get more powerful. If you feel and believe with all your heart that Jesus is the truth, imagine the double bracket Jesus, which is a deeper Jesus. If you're doing yoga and your life is changing and getting better, imagine really doing the yoga of yoga here. If you're a scientist and you would like to understand the ultimate structures of reality and nature, and physics and cosmology, and the physiology of the body and medicine, and all of these great arts that are going here, it goes even deeper. You don't throw it out, you build on it, you go deeper. Everything gets deeper. Just as the pen that's seen here is already quite an accomplishment. Imagine the pen here. You don't throw away the pen, you promote it. You don't throw away yourself, you promote it. You liberate it. So you don't have to kill and destroy and break down, you need to rise. That's one of the main points you begin to see from source science. We don't have to kill all the beautiful things in our lives, all the good things. We don't have to kill democracy, we have to realize it. We have to let go of the colonized that keeps us broken from the pluribus unum, to take democracy deeper. It's beautiful. Take science deeper so we can really have a deeper cognitive rationality. Take mathematics deeper. All of our technologies that we have is magnificent. The MRIs and the internet and the cell phones and the going to the moon and the Hubble telescopes and on, jet age, all of this, they're being gifted from the source. It's Logos who's gifting all of the gifts that we have. So it's not a matter of disrespecting it, but honoring it. Take it higher. That has often been misunderstood because our great teachers, speaking to humanity, often take what seems like a harsh line to say, you got to kill the ego, you got to stop desiring, because it traps you here. You must give up, feelings. It sounds like, you've got to sacrifice this and sacrifice that. It sounds awful. Because it's misdiagnostic. What they're trying to say is that, folks, check out the motherboard that's creating our disaster and let it go. We have a choice. We don't have to use this pattern. We can go to a deeper pattern. So the single bracket life and the double bracket life, it doesn't mean you have to kill the single brackets. Let's end on this note. Once we get the basic science, that there's never outside of the infinite field. Wherever we are, we're in the field. So whatever story you're carrying, your high self is right there with you. This is huge. If you wanted one symbolic representation that captures human journey of evolution, whatever story we evolved to here, and I'm carrying this story, a single bracket, my double bracket self has been holding me and funding me and there for me all along. So that as I rise into my true self, I have to somehow question and let go of a motherboard, a smotherboard, so that the motherboard, the true motherboard, the source board, can shine. And this is our journey of awakening into the real self. But that's not far away. That's right with me now. So when you see I, the double bracket I is right there with the single bracket I. If we can get that, that's joyous. That's beautiful. We don't have to be scared. I can't get it. It's far away. My high self is not here. No, your high self is closer to you than you are. The infinite presence is more close to where we are than we are. We're displacing the infinite by taking up and hogging the space with a technology that's pushing it away. In a phobia, we have autophobia. We're scared of ourselves. Because if we faced ourselves, if this self can face the high self, it'll get blown away. It'll bliss out. It'll be a magnificent breakthrough. That's what we want. We want to come to be. And it's not far away. Our being, our high self, whatever name you use, the Buddha self, the Christ self, the Om self, it's right here already. We have to get out of the way. That's wisdom and enlightenment in scripture and reason. Step out of the cave. Let go of the technology that's blocking us for a higher integral technology. That's where we're going to go more deeper in our next follow-up. So please, there's a lot to absorb and breathe. And thank you so much for staying with me. And remember, when you're going through these, I try to make it brief. I would like to do 20-minute stints with each of these meditations, but they just grow and take time. And it must be possibly exhausting for you to absorb it. So you have a chance to repeat it and go through it again and stop and pause and breathe along the way. I hope you do. Because there's a lot to absorb in these meditations. I'm reliving 3,000 years of human evolution and history, of our wisdom and scriptures, and trying to bring it together in an unum vision with you and for you. As in this journey and guide, your meditative guide into the source life that awaits us. And it's life and death. So thank you so much for having the patience and the courage to hang with me. I hope you do. And we're going to go deeper and deeper. There's so much to share. And I'll just keep going as long as you can stay with me. And it's there. And in a way, you know, my son asked me, will people understand you, Dad? Will people, my daughter and my sons ask me, will people get this? Because they're struggling. They were raised in this. And they're struggling with the culture around them. But they're seeing more and more in their own labs. Because this is not about what Daddy says. This is about science. What I'm sharing is not about me. The double bracket is not me. I'm trying to code what I'm hearing from the great geniuses of all the history and doing the science of the source. It's science we're talking about. Technology. The technology of consciousness and reason. That's what we're talking about. And that's in each of us. And as Buddha said, it's not about following a teacher or a guru or anything. It's find your way. Be a lamp. Turn on the lamp within you. That's what it's about. That's how I help my students become critical, aware humans. Rational beings are critical beings who think for themselves and find their own agency. That's the whole point of the source science. You have to I am. No one can I am for you. You have to I am for yourself. Each person has to find her code. When she says I am, and see myself as a coach trying to bring out the deepest wisdom of the ages, and what's been eclipsed and missing, and something new that's coming in the global lens. To open it up and release the medicine of our great teachers, that's within each of us, waiting to come out and blossom. So often my kids will say, Dad, it's been hard for us to get the science. How are people out there in the mass culture, in the marketplace, across that have not studied, have not done philosophy, they've not done high sophisticated academic work, can they get it? And my answer is yes, because the source code is in each of us. And these sessions that I'm performing with you is coaching to help us awaken the Logos Sophia code within us, the Christ code, the Buddha code, the Moses code, the God code, the code of source reality. We don't have to use God talk or spiritual talk or New Age talk. We don't need any of that. We need science. We need the unum pluribus axiom of reality. That is the heart of reason and self-evident. And when we get that and follow this through, I'm trying to help with, as far as I've gone in my research and teaching, to help share that with you so you can get and tap the Logos code in each of us and discover our connectivity and our humanity and our dignity and our power to face your high self that only you can do. So in a way, what I'm doing in presenting these performing the source code is that I say to my kids, well, if people now are not ready to hear this, so be it. Because the source is holding us. And when we are ready, those who are ready to get it will get it. And I believe that there are millions of people out there who are ready. They've been readied by the source. LUI, living under the influence. I call it LUI, living under the influence of the double bracket call. That's in each of us. People are ready. like Christmas tree bulbs ready to light up when you plug in the juice. What is the juice? The source code. And the tree on this planet of humanity is ready to light up. And if it takes another century, I don't know if you can survive on the planet, given where we are now and how extreme the meltdown that we're facing on the Titanic, the cultural Titanic, is bad. I'm not in any way pessimistic because I know the source wins. The infinite force that's sourcing all of our lives is always going to preside and win, even if we're self-destructive in certain profound ways and self-sabotaging. And if these performances are meant for the youth of the 22nd century, and people won't get it in this century, that's all right. Jesus' code for 2,000 years has been waiting to blossom fully. 2,000 years. Buddha's code is waiting. The yoga code is waiting to be blossoming. The Logos code of Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, the genius, is waiting. So in double bracket time, now time, is no time at all. So if these meditations fall on deaf ears, or people who say, not for me, that's all right, that's fine. Perhaps it's for the children of the 22nd century and down the road. There's no getting around it. We've got to face the source science and source code, and the source is holding us, and it's a matter of time. And I think the time is now for us to get this. So that's how I feel about this. So I give my heart to these performances as if it is a Nag Hammadi hidden text, so to speak. It's going to be, if it has to be buried for a next century, so that the rising youth of the 22nd century were beginning to say, yeah, we're ready, we got it, then so be it. You know, I'm dancing with you. So, but I do think we're all ready now. And I give my heart to this, and I hope you think deeply about it and let the medicine work on you and stay with me. We're going to go deeper. Thank you so much for staying with me.